And now we have the privilege of celebrating John Cobb's 99th and 100th birthday. Our first part of the program is to give you a little sample of what was celebrated on last Thursday night for us, Friday for the Chinese. They did a massive celebration, and we're going to see a clip from that this morning. We're also going to hear some really important testimonies, tributes from Meijun and Zhihe Wang, and they are the planners of the Chinese program as well as good friends of John's, and we invite them to begin. Meijun and Zhihe, are you here?
Okay.
Okay, so glad to see all of you here, our dear friend. Yeah, so this is really wonderful, you know, to get together, yeah, to celebrate Dr. Cobb's birthday, yeah, here with all of you. You know, why do we celebrate Dr. Cobb's 100th birthday when he is officially 99 years old? You know, first, just as Mary Elizabeth said, yeah, so that is the Chinese culture, you know. And then with this Chinese culture, so where special attention to given to celebrating years ending in nines for older elderly individuals. Yeah, rather than those ending in zero. Birthday celebration occur at the age ending in 9, like 59, 69, 79, 89, 99, mark their 16th, 17th, 80th, 19th, 100-year birthday. Yeah, respectively, hence this year, you know, at Dr. Cobb's age of 99, we celebrate his 100th birthday. Also, there is another reason. It also, you know, follow another Chinese custom, you know, where the time spent in the womb, it's incalculate in the calculation of a children's age. So we calculate Dr. Cobb's birthday age before he was born. He is born. Yeah. So I just feel so fortunately to have met Dr. Cobb in 1998. And in the over 2 decades of working together, his character and his wisdom and thoughts have deeply influenced me and changed my life. You know, Dr. Cobb, you know, has never pushed us to go to church. You know, you know, Chinese minister, when I arrived in US, they just pushed me to go to Chinese church, you know, but Dr. Cobb never do this to us. And nor has ever blended us, you know. I remember when we started organize the Climate International Forum on Ecological Civilization in 2005 or 2006, you know, that time, you know, I was completely unfamiliar with those trivial and those specific tasks. You know, I usually be a professor. I know nothing about those kind of thing. So definitely I made a lot of mistakes. But Dr. Cobb never criticized me, never blamed me, say, oh, this thing you had done badly. Never, you know. So always encourage me. Oh, that is a wonderful event. You did a wonderful job. That is how he keep me work harder and harder. And also definitely I have read his books. Not all of them, but some of them definitely. But I pay more attention to his daily life. I see him 是光停 down to tie jeans shoelace. And I see him turning off lights when people left. Yeah. I also see the holes in his sweater. And I see the leftover instant noodle, he ate. Even for Chinese, we don't do that. But he said he eat, And so I think, so there are many examples. But for me, he is not only a great thinker in our time, but also a human being, a real human being. The way of his influence on us, on me, and change my life as the Tang point to Fu. Said in his poem, Spring Night Rain. So the quote, his influence, like it enters the light unseen with the wind and moisture the things finely without a sound. Quote back. So I feel my life, it's very rich because he is in it. So thank you, Dr. Cobb. Happy birthday. That is a big day for you and also for me. Thank you.
Zhihe, would you like to add some words of tribute?
Yeah, thank you, Mary Elizabeth. Thank everyone for your coming. May just talk about Dr. Cobb's impact on her personal life. I want to say a few word about the John Cobb influence on China. Okay, yeah. So then, when we prepare this big party, we found not only for Dr. Cobb. It's kind of like the whole China celebrates his birthday. Why Chinese people love him so much? Not only this, not personally, because I think the Dr. Cobb points to a new direction for China. In the past 40, 30 years, the China grew very quickly, developed economically. But right now, a lot of people got rich, but people lost the sense of belonging, lost the direction, lost the meaning of life. That's why people feel a puzzle. Yeah. Dr. Cobb point to gave a lot of people the meaning of life. So when we prepare this big party, we feel very moved, very touched. And the process of the movement in China become a kind of a phenomenal, right? Called Carol Johnson said, even the process reality is a very difficult book. We already have 3 versions, different translator, different publisher. Also, White has the book Aim of Education. We have 10 versions, different publisher, different translator. That means not me and me, we handle behind. People just love White Hat, love process out. I think the whole China, we need a process out because if we go to ecological expedition, it's impossible without the philosophy behind, right? I think a process philosophy, the process philosophy is that's the philosophy. That's in my opinion. So when we prepare this party, the reason why we feel touched, we can see. I didn't know whether you have already watched this 2 hours party. Maybe Mary Liz, you watch the whole process, right? Yeah. So you can see there's some moment, for example, there's in the end, the doctor who composed the poem, and also he sing himself. He sing the poem, yeah, make it become a song. And he lay down we were told he lay down in bed because he got sick in bed 3 days, 6 days. But the 6 days, she, even with the not a good shape, he composed this song and sing the song, yeah. And that's the girl who sing the song Memories. She's the girl who Dr. Cobb hold her. Yeah. And so that's her grandma write a Chinese painting for Dr. Cobb. And her father writes the Chinese longevity calligraphy. This whole family, 3 generations, tribute their love to Dr. Cobb. Like remember in the beginning, there's the 2 boys, 1 boy, 1 girl. They play piano together, right? Yeah. That's the boy is the person who went to Cobb with the Whitehead kindergarten. He fed Dr. Cobb with a little hand, the spoon, feed Dr. Cobb. Yeah. So the many people want to Dr. Cobb go to China. They want to take good care of him. So when Dr. Cobb, they really need help. Yeah. So you can see we really found the love people. Yeah. Also the beginning, the leader, the China Green Foundation. This is probably number 1, number 2, very. Yeah. The president Jinfeng Zhou said on behalf of millions of Chinese environmentalists, they want to pay their respect to Dr. Cobb. So you can see that's a very narrow circle, smaller personal community. This is a big event. It's a celebration, big holiday for all the Chinese. Yeah, that is I want to share from my heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zhihe. And we're going to show a video clip from the Chinese celebration. We're beginning this celebration here with China because John has had a vast influence there. That influence is largely due to Zhihe and Mei, who have founded the Institute for the Postmodern Development of China, which began as the China Project, and the China Project continues on, and it involves a great many amazing communities that have grown up, schools, farms, and so forth. And all of this has come from the influence of John and the vision and hard work of Zhihe and Mei. So for those who don't know about this, you're getting introduced to some of the celebrative joy in China with this clip.
100年一个世纪，对一个人来说是很长的时间。在2024年的曙光温暖这个蓝色星球之际，我们的生态圣贤迎来了100岁生日。100年科老智慧，世纪生态文明，向科贝院士100岁生日致敬。
In which nature is being profoundly wounded by human actions. Many of us are troubled about the new situation. we realize that we are making ourselves very vulnerable to famine. Much land and water are poisoned. Much topsoil has been lost. The climate is being changed unintentionally and in ways that disrupt food production. The world needs to integrate work in the soil with our hands and reflection about the ultimate nature of things, practical matters such as feeding ourselves, with political theory. In short, important theory with important practice.
科布院士怀揣着对地球众生无尽的爱，穿过百年光阴，一路走来。1952年，获得芝加哥大学博士学位。1969年，实现自己的生态转向。1971年，世界上第一个关于生态危机的学术研讨会召开。西方世界第一本生态哲学著作是否太晚出版？过程研究创刊。1973年，创办过程研究中心。1981年，出版《生命的解放：对话阿部正雄》。1982年，出版《超越对话》。1984年，对话大卫波姆。1989年，出版《为了共同的福祉》。1999年，出版《地球主义对经济主义的挑战》。2002年，出版《后现代主义与公共政策》。2004年，创立中美后现代发展研究院。2005年，出版《精神的互换：关系世界中的过程精神》，对话国学大师汤一介，对话全国政协副主席丁光训。2006年，举办首届克莱门生态文明国际论坛。2008年，出版《怀特海术语大全》和《回到达尔文》，首次在国际社会提出生态文明的希望在中国。2010年，出版《精神的破产》。2013年，出版《理性与赴美》。2014年，入选美国人文与科学院院士，出版科布自传，创立非营利机构潘多树，参加国家行政学院举办的乡村文明复兴论坛。2015年，亲家主办生态文明千人大会，另一种选择走向生态文明，创办生态文明研究院，出版《为了我们共同的家园》，与菅春元副总理对话全球生态文明建设。2017年，与许家路副委员长对话生态文明与中华民族复兴，成立年度生态文明科布院士工作站。2018年，出版《让哲学发挥作用，走向生态文明》。2019年，成立云南普洱市科布生态文明院士工作站，出版《中国与生态文明》，创立科布研究院。2019年10月，担任韩国立生生态论坛主席，并发表主旨演讲。2020年，出版《选择生活：作为世界最好希望的生态文明》。2021年，发动生生不息地球运动。2023年，自聘助理，延迟退休，每天练它600下，因为这个世界还需要我。
Really good boy.
John Cobb is someone very far away and very close to our hearts. He is the one who practices the word loyalty.
John Cobb is one of the greatest thinkers, humanitarians, visionaries, and human beings who I've had the honor of knowing.
柯老是我们这个时代圣人般的学者。
Dr. Cobb is the most realistically, carefully, and profoundly thinking leader I know.
他竭尽全力推进全球生态文明建设。他认为中国是生态文明建设之希望。
He breaks a collective silence on authority, wanders a cold and utilitarian modern world with his gentle personality and profound knowledge.
I believe your great contribution to the world is introducing a new worldview, providing humanity with a fresh perspective to rethink of every aspect of modernity and consequently designing a more promising new civilization, ecological civilization for humanity and the entire planet.
I think Dr. Cobb is a role model to all of us for his courage and commitment to creating a better world.
So I don't think that his legacy is about what he has done single-handedly, but about the lives that are being changed through that web of relations, through communities of communities of communities, for generations to come.
无论是在中国还是西方，柯老一再呼吁人类应当以共同之善、永续生态和过程思想作为发展生态文明的基础。他做了非常多的贡献，因而得到生态圣哲的美誉。
He personally opened the door to my major career pursuits, thereby giving my life a deeper meaning and purpose.
John, you are a dream catcher. You are a person who encourages dreaming. And you also help all of us discern which dreams might need to be left behind and which of them bear promise for transforming the world. And your help to all of us in discerning a way that might make the future more life-giving for all of creation.
Happy birthday, Dr. Cobb.
Thank you, Dr. Cobb, and happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Dear Dr. John Cobb, Happy Centennial Birthday.
致敬柯老100岁寿辰，致敬大能之能、大德之德、大量之量的圣贤柯老。
感恩柯老，让世界在生态思维的过程哲思中闪耀永恒的光辉。祝福柯老，愿柯老的智慧之光在下一个100年的生命过程中点亮更多生命。100年柯老，柯老100年。
Meijun and Zhihe, thank you, thank you, thank you. What a tribute. As we transition, I do want to say that you are responsible for so much of the building that is taking place toward ecological civilization that we also owe you a huge congratulations and thank you. And now we're going to shift, and we have a few people who are going to share with us their own tributes, brief tributes, and then we're going to open it to others. Before we begin that, I want to give a special shout out to Ron Hines, who has organized our program for today and who would be presiding, except that he is caring for his wife who is healing in wonderful ways. Thanks to Ron. Our first tribute will be offered by Jay McDaniel, and he is the former chair of the Cobb Institute, as well as the present chair of the board of the Center for Process Studies. Jay.
Well, hello, everybody. It's good to see you. I attended a conference about 15 years ago in Oregon, and the subject was Buddhist-Christian dialogue, and John was speaking. And I remember as the person introduced John, I think there were about 200 in the audience. the person stopped and he said, by the way, how many of you are here because of John Cobb? And 3/4 of the people in that auditorium raised their hand. He was asking the question, how many of you have been influenced in a rather profound way by John Cobb? And at that small gathering, it was most of the people. And I'm guessing that I could ask that question on this Zoom call right now. I bet I could get 100%. How many of you are influenced in a profound way by John Cobb? You don't need to raise your hand if you wish. I'm pretty sure it's 100%. And so I want to speak to you as a student of John's, knowing that all of you are also students of John's. Some of you have had him in a class, all of you have been taught by him. And I started thinking, what is it like to be a student of John Cobb's? And I want to suggest, at least in my case, there's 6 ways that John has been and still is a role model for me. And maybe some of these ways will also be true to you. One is a way that Meijun introduced earlier. For me, he's been a role model in how he lives his daily life, how he interacts with people, how he treats people. And it's we live in a society that prioritizes important people and less important people, a ranking society. Not for John. John, I think, sees everybody kind of on the same plane. It's not divided into the important and the less important. And he treats them that way. You can be in John's apartment talking about ultimate reality, and he'll get a phone call from someone that needs personal counseling about family life. He shifts gears. And it's not that he's going from one important topic to a lesser important topic, or one important person to a non-famous person. It's all the same for him. I admire that. I admire the fact that he lives simply. I admire the fact that his sweaters have holes in them, and he's probably owned them for 40 years. I admire the fact that he's unpretentious, not exactly caught up in himself. He could be, but he's not. I don't think he thinks of in those terms. And one last thing about how he lives his daily life, I just want to mention, is his relationship with Jean. I was lucky enough to know Jean as well as John when I was a student. And they were a team. And she helped him and he helped her. And she was very much a part of the John Cobb that I knew. I couldn't think of John without Jean. So here's to you, Jean, wherever you are. And here's to you, John, and I know where you are. Now, a second way that he's a role model for me, and I know it's true for you, is how and what he thinks, his ideas. A few of us in this room are influenced by the philosophy of Alfred North Whitehead. One way or another, we learned Whitehead with help from John and his books. We're influenced by so many different ideas. The way he claimed and helped make sense of the idea of God in a Christian natural theology. The way he reformed economic thinking and for the common good. The way he introduced interreligious dialogue, not simply as the truth is one, the paths are many, but maybe the truths are many too. So let's think in pluralistic terms. It would be very difficult to name a particular subject that John has not dealt with. And when he deals with a subject, he almost always deals with it in an interdisciplinary way. He's not compartmentalized. He's not siloed. He's not interested in theology, a building called theology, separate from other buildings. He's interested in all the buildings and how the windows allow air to go through all of them at the same time. Now, a third way that John's a role model for me is how he teaches. He once coined the phrase, for me at least, he said, my method is propositive, not dogmatic, propositive. I'm interested in offering proposals for our consideration, for your consideration, for mine. Now, you know that comes from Whitehead a little bit because that's the meaning of a proposition in Whitehead, but you don't have to go to Whitehead for that. It's giving possibilities for thought. Some of you who had a course with John also had both the joy and the terror of an oral final exam. I can remember an oral final exam. You mean you go in and you need to talk to him? And he's going to ask you questions? Now, if you've had one of those, you remember. You'd stand outside his office and then you'd go in. I had an oral exam in Whitehead. He would typically give 3 questions. The first 2 were softball questions. Not this easy, who wrote Process and Reality, but he asked a question he knew that you could answer. The second one was also fairly easy. What is apprehension? Well, you knew apprehension was something like a feeling and you got it. But the third question always would stretch you and take you on a journey. He would ask something you had never imagined. And all of a sudden, your own thought process was taken hundreds of miles simply by the question he asked. You'd leave with your head spinning, thinking, I never thought of that. And here I go. So John, as a teacher, was a mind stretcher. A fourth way that I've been influenced by John is by his moral vision. It's not just the content, it's also the whole idea that we live our lives with a sense of calling, a sense of a moral vision, a sense of the way that we think the world needs to be and how we can help. And John's moral vision these days is around the idea of ecological civilization. But for him, and I admire this so much, he never separated the abstract, general, global ideal of ecological civilization from local settings. Ecological civilization means nothing unless it's concretized in creative localization in particular places. Hence his devotion these last few years to Pomona as a place where that can happen. Fifth way that John's really influenced by me, and I know that there's some of you too, is by his personal faith. Recently John has written a book lifting up the idea of Jesus as Abba, as kind of the way to think of the divine. Now, some people might resist the language of Abba. How about Amma? Well, he's all about that, and he's dealt that with in his book. But his general point is there's something like love in the depths of the nature of things. And you can conceive it in different ways. But it is divine. Well, I think John has helped many, many people, myself much included, trust in that something as an organizing spirit for life. Last thing to note, I want to call it his leadership style. Now, have any of you ever been pulled into something you weren't quite sure you were meant to be pulled into because you were asked by John Cobb? I bet if I asked for some hands up here, I bet I'd get some. John is a possibility giver and a door opener. Now, occasionally you can feel like you're pushed through the door because you're not exactly sure that's a door you can go through, but he has confidence in you. He meets people where they are, and he says, here's a path you might consider. Here's something you might do. You might start this organization. You might volunteer in this way. You might write this essay. John also is not insistent on results. I mean, he likes results, but he's willing to try things out and not be sure where they're going to go because he too believes the future is not yet decided. So for all those reasons, John Cobb, you are my mentor, and I bet you're a mentor for a whole lot of people here today. Happy birthday, my teacher.
Sandra Lubarsky. Sandra is another person who has done great things in this world, ecologically, interreligiously, and so forth. Sandra, the floor is yours.
Here we go. Thank you so much for allowing me to have a few minutes to reflect on how John has influenced my life. And I took very seriously the assignment, how has John impacted my life? And I found it to be a gratitude exercise. And what I'm going to say really isn't an exaggeration. I simply wouldn't be the person I am and have done the things with my life that I did had John not been in my life and been my teacher. So it's not possible for me to articulate all the ways that John has impacted my life. Suffice it to say that I can imagine all kinds of confusions that would have dogged me throughout my life had I not been John's student. I wish I could say that on my own without John's critique of higher education and the university, that I would have been able to escape the piecemeal and narrow path of the usual academic career. But I am bound by John's example of honesty and modesty to admit that it's more likely that I would have been as conventional as the next academic. It's not too much to claim the following. Because of John, I found a way to negotiate being religious in the modern world. I found a way to practice Judaism in a post-Holocaust world, including a way to interpret covenantal theology and to embrace religious pluralism. Because of John, I started reading and caring deeply about the earth and all of its inhabitants. At one point in my career, I was offered a position as a director of a Jewish studies program. It was a watershed moment in my life. John doesn't know this, but because of him, I turned it down. It seemed then, and it remains the case, that the importance of earthism, John's term for world loyalty, was where I needed to give my attention. I stopped teaching religious studies and gave myself fully to teaching sustainability studies. Because of John, I came to the understanding that efforts to achieve sustainability must be linked to community building. As in so many cases, John recognized the importance of community well before everyone else in the academy, where the focus was instead on science and technology. When I had the unusual opportunity to found a master's program, I created a degree in sustainable communities. Because of John. Because of John, I eventually came to the realization that sustainability is not an ultimate goal, that it is not enough to talk about mere survival. Life teems with value-laden experience, and so our energy should be directed toward increasing value in the world. Toward that end, John once said in a class on sustainability, economics, and the environment that, quote, metaphysics must be grounded in aesthetics. Let me pause for a moment of amazement that John would make such a statement about aesthetics in a class on sustainability and economics. The utter interconnectedness and expansiveness of life pervaded John's every teaching. Because of John, I have become an advocate for the importance of beauty in shaping the world we want to live in. Well before John decided that he would orchestrate an international event on seizing an alternative and promoting ecological civilization, it was the case that his intense intellectual energies were always accompanied by strategies for change-making. John taught us that it is not enough to think inclusively and creatively. We need to think strategically and to act in the world. This has been an unending part of John's life. And so it is that for those of us who have reached the age of retirement, because of John, retirement is not an option. In the case of my husband and myself, that means that because of John, we are involved in creating a communiversity in our hometown of Flagstaff. I know that everyone on this Zoom gathering could recite a because of John litany. John, because of you, our lives have been enriched in so many ways. Without disrespecting the fact that you have reached your 99th or 100th birthday, it is the Jewish tradition to say this: may you be like Moses and live and be well to 120. Thanks very much. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you very much. And now we turn to Tandeka, who is a brilliant scholar and public intellectual who has had influence in many, many parts of our world and is here to give her tribute.
John Cobb Jr. didn't change my life. He saved it. I was still a television producer when I met John in 1982. I had returned to graduate school because I could not make sense of why I didn't feel like a success, even though that's the way the world treated me as an Emmy Award-winning television producer. But every Saturday morning, I sat on my couch and cried for half an hour, clueless as to why I felt so distressed. So I returned to graduate school to study feelings, hoping I could learn how to think about them, about my feelings, in a way that would give me what I needed: insight, release, Erlösung, liberation. John's astonishing influence on my life began in class on day one, when he said, well, of course, there's no such thing as a self. There are only experiences, he said, that are acts of becoming, no two identical. What becomes is the experience, and the experience is becoming. What did he mean? I was clueless, but nevertheless, I felt affirmed in some inexplicable way by John. Why did I feel liberated? John saved my life by practicing what he preaches. He listens and hears students into speech. I told John I was an atheist, and after listening to my explanation, he simply said, "You are the strangest atheist I've ever met." I wasn't an atheist, of course. I simply rejected the traditional ways in which the theistic categories had been defined. Years later, John inscribed one of his books to me with the words, "To Tandeka, a Methodist of a higher order." John had a way of including me in a world where words reveal so much more than can be thought or said, but like a gift inspires what is in hand, at hand, and felt as revelation. John's enormous generosity of heart combined with his global brilliance became and remains for me a beacon of hope in my life, ever anew. John is someone who continues to teach me by example how to celebrate being part of a global community where everything is given away because nothing is ever lost. What remains, of course, is love, which is always an actual occasion, an actual experience, especially when in the presence of John Cobb Jr. John is my weekly conversation partner and dear friend, is always for me love beyond belief in my life. Thank you, John. Truly, thank you. And happy birthday.
Thank you, Tandeka. I think that those of you who know the people who have spoken know that every word they've said is part of who they are and part of what they've given to this world. So thank you so much to Jay and Sandra and Tandeka. We turn now to Richard Livingston, who is the executive director of the Cobb Institute and who is going to come out from behind the camera to speak his voice. Richard?
Yes. And now it's my turn to feel a little out of place among so many bright and shining stars. So I'm just going to share a brief reflection with you. As intimidated as I am among the others who've shared their thoughts already, the first thing that I thought of when I started to think about, well, what could I say, is that trying to figure out what to say in a moment like this, it's a little like trying to buy a gift for the person who seems to have everything. It's like, what do you say about someone about whom seemingly everything has already been said and probably been said much better than you could possibly say it? I first met John. He probably wouldn't remember this. It's been too many years now, and probably an insignificant conversation among so many others. But I would remember being so excited the very first time I knocked on his apartment door and sat in his presence just to have a brief conversation with him. I had looked forward to meeting him because of my excitement to go to Claremont to study philosophy and religion, but hopefully focus on process thought in some significant way. So I first met him when I moved to Claremont back in 2006, when I very first began. This was at the beginning, January 2006, I remember, when I began my PhD program. And we weren't there for more than just a couple of weeks when I walked over to the Center for Process Studies to ask, do you need any help? And is there any way that I might be able to work here? And that's when I began this journey that I'm still on here at this very moment, because I worked part-time at the Center for Process Studies as a PhD student, and here I am now full-time helping with the Cobb Institute, one of the successor organizations to the Center for Process Studies. But I didn't work very closely with him. I did meet him, and we had a few brief interactions here and there throughout my PhD program, but I didn't work closely with him. I didn't have very many conversations with him. I didn't get to know him until he began encouraging me, began calling me, luring me to come help get this new thing off the ground, what was then called the Claremont Institute for Process Studies. He invited me to come help get it off the ground back in 2019. Well, because of my interest in process relational thinking as a doctoral student, I had read a decent amount of John's work and I heard him speak many times. So I became well aware, as many of you are, of his brilliance as a scholar and his enormous influence on the process movement as a whole. But it wasn't until we started working together during the early days of the Institute that I began to see his giftedness as a visionary. Now, visionaries are blessed with an ability to see things that others aren't able to see, to imagine radical new possibilities, and to envisage a world profoundly different from the past. But it isn't enough just to dream a dream, to conceive an idea or hope for transformation. In order to realize or bring about one's vision, one must be able to communicate well, to inspire others and organize communities. And over the course of his career, John has repeatedly shown his ability to excel at all of those things in very exceptional ways. As we all know, our little community, this little community, the Cobb Institute community for process and practice, is just one of the many that he has helped found. But here's the thing, obviously, he's never founded any of them alone, but especially with ours, this one, this institute, this organization, this community, the blueprints would have never been designed, the foundation would have never been laid, and the structure would have never emerged without his guidance, leadership, and intimate involvement. And he's still involved. It was John who not only provided a space to gather together, as Ron Hines likes to regularly remind us, this weekly gathering, this Tuesday morning for those of us who are in the Claremont area, this weekly Tuesday morning gathering that eventually evolved into this institution. And that's one way, it's a very important way to think about how this story unfolded. It began in his living room and eventually evolved into what we are today. But he also, in addition to providing a space where we could gather together as things began, he also created a space to envision with him, to stand side by side with him, to build something with him that might make a real difference in the world. And it's that standing alongside one another, a couple of others have mentioned it already, but standing alongside one another that's been so vital. Because even though this community and this meeting here where we are today bears John's name, what we're involved in is about much more than him or any one person. And he would be the first to humbly acknowledge that. I've had the good fortune to spend quite a few hours with John, working behind the scenes on a number of projects, assisting him with courses that he's taught, fixing his computer, seeking his advice, agonizing over occasionally things happening in my life. And one of the things that I've been most impressed with is that he's never tried to make this about him. Never once have I gotten the sense that he has any ulterior, self-centered motives to get others to feed his ego or to put him on a pedestal, to shine the spotlight on him, or even to build up his personal legacy. He knows and realizes he will have an important legacy, as this meeting testifies to, but that's not what he's interested in. Quite the opposite, actually, because what matters to him is something much bigger and more long-lasting than any individual life, including his own. What he cares about is a message and a movement to create communities of communities of communities that can bring about an ecological civilization. What he cares about is transforming the world, but one small step at a time, which means influencing one person at a time and inspiring a movement that will need to span over many lifetimes. He understands better than anyone else that this work will take multiple persons in multiple communities, in multiple locations, over multiple generations. And our only hope to realize this vision is by growing together or not at all. So among the many ways that John Cobb has impacted my life, he has shown me what it means to have a brilliant mind, be a great visionary, and be an inspirational leader all of those things, while also being a humble, kind, wise, generous, and selfless person. And I can speak to that on a personal level. I don't know, perhaps more than any other, because of I've witnessed firsthand, and I've been the beneficiary of his generosity and selflessness. So even though he doesn't seek to be placed higher than others, I will always look up to and admire him. I will always be grateful that he never made me feel anything other than a colleague, a peer, an equal partner in this ongoing pursuit of a better world. So, John, working with you and having your support has meant more than you will ever know. Thank you, and happy birthday.
Richard, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to, I don't think Charles Betterton has been able to come. He knew he knew it might not be possible, but Charles, are you here?
I think
yes, more or less. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. Yes, your Wi-Fi works. Yes, please.
Well,
Now,
thank you for the opportunity.
As Richard is the executive of the Cobb Institute, Charles is the executive of the Living Earth Movement, which is one of the most recent organizations that John has founded. So Charles, take it away.
Well, I'm just so honored and privileged and blessed to be here, a newbie to this world, to this community. It's amazing that it's only been a couple of years that the Living Earth Movement has been in existence. To continue John's legacy works, as I watched that powerful video again for the second time, I'm struck by the irony that we've spent a lot of time courting the National Committee for U.S.-China Relations, that has about 800 members, inviting them to please let John Cobb be a member. And when they watch that video, if the IPDC blesses us by letting us share it with them in Chinese, they should be thanking John Cobb for the honor and privilege of sharing his wisdom, the eco sage, with the world. I mean, they're generating $7 to $10 million a year doing what John Cobb has been doing for over 50 years. And in the last couple of years, in the 15 minutes that John Cobb spoke in his 8-minute segment, and they would have let him go on for 30 minutes. They were so pleased with what John shared yesterday or Sunday. On the third day of this international symposium for awakening humanity to its sacred mission, John Cobb demonstrated a sacred commission. And in the 15 minutes that he spoke to me, and yes, I'm a little bit biased, maybe a whole lot biased, he presented more positive, uplifting, specific answers to the question, what can we do? That the initiator, Erwin Laszlo, asked. Erwin's a youngster at 91, and he's only written 100 books so far, so he's not quite caught up to John Cobb. But as I watched that video for the first time, and again today, I see the Netflix documentary. And I am calling for, and it's presumptuous, and I'm damn proud to be that presumptuous, that we set aside the dates February 7th through the 9th, 2025, for an international 3-day symposium showcased around the fabulous 100th birthday celebration that I'm sure will already be booked, to help as many additional people around the world. And there were 86 countries represented in the symposium that we just went through. Discover the significance and substance. One of the highlights for me of that video presentation was Andrew Schwartz's son in front of him, and behind Andrew was a picture of John Cobb. The legacy, as Andrew says, continues far beyond those who have that individual personal contact with John. The people that I'm meeting with here in Borrego Springs include the producer, one of the co-producers of that event, John Raymer, founder of Compassion Games, Survival of the Kindness, certainly relates to some of the comments that Richard made about his experience with John. And three are the other presenters: Harry Yavigi, founder of Brand Earth; Dr. Tamsin Woolley Barker, featured in the The Endangered Generation documentary that's just being released. And they're all committed to continuing to further John Cobb's legacy. One of the projects that we're working on was just announced last week is one of 40 Holon projects by the Holon movement, the Holo movement. And the commitment is to continue to promote being an earthist, sharing earthisms, living towards ecological civilization. So how could I be more richly blessed, privileged, and grateful than I am? And also for this opportunity to share this in person. John, I'm speechless. You could not have done a more fabulous job. Everyone here agrees. If we had better internet, we would have all jumped on to thank you and express our deep appreciation. Look forward to the next, I won't say next 100, I will say to the next 100 years of the further fulfillment and manifestation of your ultimate sacred commission. Thank God for John B. Cobb Jr. and everyone who's been party of this program. So thank you very much. I'm complete and blessed. Thank you, Mary Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Charles. And we're going to close this part of the program with a video that Meijun is going to show. Oh, here we go.
Okay,
Good.
so I'm going to share this 1 minute performance by the Chinese native people in Yunnan province. So actually, the poor city, the mayor request the college student to perform and record this, especially for Dr. Cobb. This is their national level performance. Yeah.
赶快闭上眼，许下这次的心愿，把未来的幸福都能呈现。看即使这颗星球最大的特别，心里永远都是晴天。Happy birthday to you, Happy birthday to you， 祝你生日，祝你快乐，祝你幸福平安。Happy birthday to you，Happy birthday。
What we saw was wonderful, Meijun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you are welcome.
I mean, this was really wonderful. So thanks to you and Zhihe for having the idea of our closing with that dance. The rest of our time can be given to your testimonies, and that is, so the floor is open now to everyone in the room. And I invite you to raise your hand electronically, preferably, if you would like to speak. I think in order to maximize the number of people who are able to speak, I'm going to ask that you keep it to 1 minute, just a little bit more perhaps, so that we can hear from as many as possible. Ignacio?
I have known John since 1964. He was my professor. He supervised my dissertation, and I cooperated with him. He always invited me to be part of groups that were planning conferences. I was part of the team that planned the Alternatives to Catastrophe Conference and many others. But what I feel very happy about in terms of John is introducing John's personality and John's thought to Latin America. And all of this was absolutely providential. A Roman Catholic priest spent some time at Pilgrim Place because he got sick, and I gave him books to read, books by John, and he said, "This is very Ignatian, not Ignacio, me, but Loyola's." And he was a professor of moral theology at the Pontifical University in Bogota. And eventually we held a wonderful event there, and John was the primary speaker, and the late Jorge Pixley also was part of that team. So John has been present in Latin America in many ways. And when I asked him about a book that could be translated to Spanish or Portuguese, he did not say, well, one of my books, you know. He recognized that one of the best books on process theology is that one by Robert Mesley. And so Robert Mesley's book was not only translated into Portuguese in Brazil, but it is required reading in seminaries in Brazil. For some reason, the government can demand that a certain number of books or documents be studied by the students in the seminaries, Catholic or Protestant. So Robert Mesley's book, translated into Portuguese, has made an impact in Brazil, and that's all because John said that's the one that needs to be translated. And I can go on and on. I've been after almost 60 years of being with him, but he has always been a wonderful friend, and I'm so blessed to have been part of his journey and for him to be part of my journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio. And this gives me an opportunity to share a greeting from Bob Mesley. He and his life partner are in Mexico right now on vacation, so he's not able to be with us. But he wrote and said that, and I quote, "John Cobb powerfully transformed and enriched our lives. He gave us opportunities for teaching and traveling that we couldn't imagine otherwise. He has befriended us and earned our deep love and respect." Janine Sledden.
Greetings to all. I'm recovering from knee surgery, so hence my elegant background. But I met John. A group of Lutheran ministers in northern Minnesota would get together and have a theologian come and help them come out once a year. And so in Rainy Lake and then border with Canada, there's John coming out to give a talk, couple hours every morning with a half a sheet of paper and 2 or 3 sentences written on it. And I would imagine some of you have seen this, just some notes, and then he would hold forth for the next 2 or 3 hours. And it was glorious. And he was the one who encouraged me to come to Claremont. I was an MDiv student and I was finishing that up, and I was trying to make sense of a call to ministry, given where things were in the world and the feminist movement. And both John and Marjorie Suhaki made it possible for me actually to follow through on that call. I came to Claremont. Was it first making sense of the doctrines and then making it possible to set aside the doctrines and just focus on the ethic of Jesus, and then to turn my teaching and preaching into that same call to earthism and a process understanding of God. So made that whole career possible. Thank you, John. And then in 2013, 2012, he came to me like Jay mentioned this and asked me to do something. So when John asks you to do something, you never say no. He asked me to start a press because the major conference in 2015 was coming up, and he wanted to make sure that papers that came out of that were published. And so thanks to John's suggestion, I started Process Century Press, which has been deeply meaningful and a passion from which I cannot retire. lots of books later, and lots of wonderful just colleagues. And I guess that kind of brings me to another point, which is that Jay talked about John being a door opener, but back at the Legacy and Lure conference celebrating John Cobb in 2012 or something like that, Philip Clayton said that one of the reasons that process had come as far as it had was because John was never a gatekeeper. He always opened the door. You didn't have to have any criteria that enabled you to come in through that door. He always welcomed everyone. And so the sheer breadth of all of that introduced me to these amazing, marvelous, wonderful, compassionate scholars all over the world, which has just been deeply, deeply meaningful. And I guess I would like to, I'm kind of looking at some notes that I wrote down here, to John, it's your graciousness that continues to, that I continue to appreciate. Maybe some of you have been in a situation like this where someone's come up to John and they're talking about something so excitedly, and they're telling him like he hasn't heard of it. And he could say, well, yes, I wrote about that 50 years ago, but he never would. He would just listen as though he was hearing, because he was hearing the person's excitement and the person's having put it together in that moment as the moment to celebrate. And John, you always just smile and nod and appreciate, and that's utter graciousness with which you greet people wherever they are and wherever their enthusiasms are, has been deeply meaningful to me. And you have been given great meaning to my life, and I thank you for it. Happy birthday, dear man.
Thank you, Janine. Elsa.
Thank you, Mary Elizabeth. I met John Cobb once, but I have been so mightily influenced by others who have been influenced by him, which has been great. I'm 91 now. I was headed to seminary at some point at Claremont, and I never did make it. I became an effective lay person, non-clergy person, I say now. And I'm now a spiritual director, or I was. I'm not really practicing now because I'm at home and somewhat disabled. But I do write poetry. I try to get in on the Cobb and Friends. I have learned so much about John through the testimonies that have been made today on this Zoom presentation. And I just wanted to say, I met John. He was so personable. I was at a conference with Joanna Macy, John. You may remember many years ago. And I met you, and I think we knocked on doors together. You were so personable. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is John Cobb. And he was wonderful. I just wanted to say that I have really learned a lot about his work. And I have read some of Moorhead's work and some of John's work. I always am attuned to the name John Cobb. Right now, I am quite involved in interfaith work, and that has been really helpful. And I do what I can. I'm a poet, and I write poetry occasionally probably about a better world that we can live in. And I just wanted to say, I wouldn't miss this for anything. Happy birthday, John, on your 99th or 100th birthday. Long live your ideas and long live you. You have been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Pat.
Well, I'll speak for just a moment then. Although I feel intimidated to say anything in front of this wonderful group of people. But back in the 90s, no, let me see. No, later than that. Ron Farmer came to our 8:30 adult discussion group at Manhattan Beach Community Church and started doing such a great job of unpacking scriptures in the light of a process reading things. But so often when he would suggest something, I would go, because I've been deeply involved in how to make sense out of our Christian tradition. And I would go, yes, that's what I resonate with. That's what I was coming to in my own thinking. And finally, I said to Ron Farmer, does anybody else think like this? And he said, well, the person who's done the most writing is John Cobb out in Claremont. So I was getting ready to retire in 2013. As a kindergarten teacher, I had done philosophy graduate work, but had then gone off and gotten married and never done anything with the philosophy graduate work. But in 2013, I went to the Summer Institute out at Claremont School of Theology and was just blown away by both the spirit and how articulately ideas were unpacked. Back for the Summer Institute in summer of 2014. And then in that institute, John Cobb said, now we're going to plan a 15 ecological civilization conference. And I would love the people who are here to find ways to suggest things about that or contribute to this plan as we're putting it together. So I knew I was going to be there for 2015. I was amazed at how much risk taking was going on in that 2015 conference, to just the way John was funding it, the way John was just envisioning it, and that it actually might be the seeds, the little mustard seeds that were going to grow into something big. And that's about what it turned out to be. All these organizations started forming around that. So I've had some wonderful experiences in the Whitehead Kindergarten, having been a kindergarten teacher, the Whitehead Kindergarten outside of Beijing. Those are wonderful experiences. But when the spirit is right. That's the thing you always know. You know when the vision is right. You know when the humility is right, that it's not about us personally and our ego, that we are a conduit for the spirit. And it's been, when I go back to being a teenager and trying to say, I know the church has something, but I know the scientific worldview has something as well. And how do I integrate these ideas? And I was struggling with that as a teenager and feeling so lonely. And it's so wonderful to have found one's home, that one's not lonely anymore, because we're with people who have this intuition of where the heart should be, and minds that are always open to fresh perspectives that validate where the heart and the spirit is supposed to be. So I couldn't be more grateful. Thank you for embodying that, John, and happy birthday.
Thank you, Pat. And Michael Whitmer and Marcus Ford have their hands up.
Thank you. Yeah, I share the sentiment of a lot of the speakers about being intimidated by the folks who are in this audience. And I have to note that so many of you are scholars and theology students and people who've actually studied John's books and studied under him. I come from a completely different background. I didn't actually touch process philosophy until I was several years into retirement. And I own a half a dozen of John's books. And I'm really embarrassed to admit I haven't finished any of them. And despite that, John has profoundly shaped my life. And it's a little baffling to me how that happened, because it's unfolded so subtly and so incrementally and so organically. But I find myself fully immersed. I mean, my life is, every thread of my life really connects back to this system of thinking, this coherent vision of the world and the universe that gives my life coherence and a purpose that it wouldn't have. As somebody spoke to creative localization, and that has really been the hook for me, that this way of thinking has such a powerful application in community work, and you don't even have to mention the system of thinking itself, just have to model it. And I use the phrase counteracting fragmentation, and that resonates in a powerful way. So I have to think of myself not so much as a child of John Cobb, maybe as a grandchild, a member of the general public who can be influenced by this way of thinking without ever mastering the language of it. And I think that I may be part of the wider audience that process thought needs to reach, not through erudite reading and teaching, but through powerful and demonstrative community work. And so that's really become my vocation in retirement. And thanks, John. I owe it all to you and to your children. And I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to work on your team. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Michael. Marcus.
Hi, John. I just wanted to take this opportunity to pay tribute to you and wish you a happy birthday. I came to Claremont in 1972 with the noble intention of avoiding service in Vietnam. That was my only motivation. And I had heard of you. I had not heard of you. I had heard of Whitehead through one of your former students, Richard Overman. And then when I got to Claremont, I heard of you directly because you were there, but also through David Griffin, another one of your brilliant students. And I think it's a great tribute to you as an intellectual and as a scholar to have fostered such brilliant students. And then my own experience with you has been of 50 years of support and encouragement, and gently, as many people have paid testament to, kind of pushing me forward into directions I'm not sure I would have gone otherwise. And I'm so grateful for your encouragement and your luring, I guess is the more technical term. But you've been an enormous influence in my life, all for the good. So happy birthday, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Ron Nazir.
Yeah, hi, this will be very brief, but I was moved by Whitehead in my senior year in college many years ago with his talk to the Harvard Business School on foresight, when he said the behavior of the community is largely dominated by the business mind. A great society is one in which its men and now women of business think greatly of their function. And that has been motivating me through my entire career. And I want to thank John specifically for this book, For the Common Good. I come from a business background, but I'm now spending more time trying to bridge the language between theology and business. And John and others have helped a great deal with that. And I want to thank this community, and especially Jay McDaniel, who finally got me to pick this book up and actually read it, which has been on my shelf for decades. And he gave me the courage to do it. So this community gives us all courage to do what we should do. And so, John, thank you for the work on education, which we still have got to pursue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron, and thanks to all of you who shared. Let's give John the floor, the space.
Well, I understand I'm unmuted. I'm maybe speechless otherwise, but I will try to think of something to say. I am, of course, deeply, deeply moved and appreciative of all the kind and generous things that have been said about me, and they really are. You know, when you are living in a dying planet, and you see your time is passing, and the dying is continuing, one wonders, has it been of any use? But if it helps one person, that's all that. I mean, of course, we hope that person will help others and we'll all be involved. None of us are responsible to single-handedly redirect human behavior in a sustainable way. But our lives are bound together. And so some of you, in the process of giving me credit, were also talking about quite wonderful things that you have done. And that it can spread that way from one person to another. And that I think we have a fairly large community in which there is very little rivalry and jealousy and competition. I think that we talk a lot, and I certainly think it's absolutely crucial that we shift the culture that we're in from one of primarily competition to one of primarily cooperation. And I think we've modeled that collectively. I don't think I have ever been aware of people in the process. I mean, of course, I'm aware of diversity within the community. We don't all agree about everything. That would not be healthy, I think. But that we really want to weaken other people so that we will be stronger. I think the process community has been largely free from that kind of competition. And maybe as a community, we can model some of what must be spread much, much more widely. It would be wonderful if people could simultaneously agree with what we have found about the way in which reality supports and encourages community, and actually the realization of that community in a way that can model for others. I don't know who first used the language. I may have been of community of communities. And of course, it's more than that. It's community of communities of communities of communities. It's a way of saying no one level of this is the level at which we should work. There's always a danger where we stop. I mean, nationalism is maybe an expression of a strong feeling of community, which is a community of communities of communities. So that unless it is wide open, and the nationalist feeling is fine. I think it's great to love our nations, but it is terrible to turn our nations into the ultimate objects of our loyalty, so that any other nation that threatens the complete control of everything by our nation is inherently an enemy. The good can so easily be distorted if it functions as the good in the wrong way. I appreciate everything that has been said, and I really am given hope that we can, in many, many ways, model what could be the reconstruction of a healthy planet. Some of it's happening, and if we can focus our attention on what's happening and get enough people to work at it, there may still be a great future for our planet. It's often hard to hold on to that hope. But what I've just been experiencing makes me more hopeful. And I thank you all for it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your love. And it is that love among us that is the hope of the world. So again, thanks.
Thank you, John, for being a spark for us. Thank you for living your 100 years with such depth and compassion. Thank you for all that you've done far and through and in us. And I want to say thank you to all of you who've been present today. You are yourselves visionaries, prophets, and agents of transformation. And your witness to your love for John and your admiration is touching and motivating as we go forward. Thank you so much.